is one launch on everybody's mind, and it is this little beauty, Gabrielle by Chanel. But before we get to this, I think it's important to talk a bit about Chanel and their background, so we can look at this in context. So where do we even start with Chanel? I mean, they've been making fragrance for nearly 100 years. Their very first fragrance, Chanel No. 5, is arguably the most famous fragrance of all time. It's still worn today. It's a massive bestseller. It's one of the few from the last century that has kind of not only survived, but thrived. They have cult classics, modern contemporaries such as Coco Mademoiselle and Chance. They have fragrances from the 80s that still feel current and relevant today, like Coco, and even difficult fragrances and challenging fragrances like Number 19, which still managed to stay in the mainstream. They've also done great work with their Les Exclusifs line, where they've really innovated and done surprising things like Boy, for example, which came out last year, which was kind of a feminine fougere with geranium that kind of blurred the gender lines on one of the most masculine of genres. So Chanel know how to make a perfume. They don't do it like anywhere else. They have their own fields where they grow a lot of their own materials. They kind of capture it at source. So they are really quite unique in that respect. So Chanel are arguably unique, but one thing they're not is particularly daring. And I think it would be fair to say that most of their more recent launches have been quite commercial. They're always of exceptional quality, using the best ingredients, and they smell lovely. But they are not a brand that's going to bring you something really weird and challenging. If you want that, you need to go find a niche brand, or you need to go and find Mugler, for example. Chanel bring beautiful, well-crafted fragrances that lots of people are going to like. Enter Gabrielle. You'll have heard a lot about this fragrance because it's the first feminine pillar fragrance from Chanel since Chance, which came out in 2002. Now, lots of media are reporting that this is the first Chanel fragrance in 15 years. Well, it's not technically, because as we all know, they've released masculine in that time. We had Bleu de Chanel, we've had lots of flankers, and we've also had the launch of the Les Exclusifs line, which has had fragrances added to it in that time as well. So this is far from the first fragrance from Chanel in 15 years, but it is the first standalone feminine fragrance that sits within its mainstream output. So like many things from Chanel, it takes its name from Gabrielle Coco Chanel, who is the founder of the house. That's a thread that has run through the brand's fragrance offerings since the beginning. In my review on my blog, I said, at Chanel, all roads lead back to Chanel. And it's true. We have Coco, we have Coco Mademoiselle, we have Number 19 and Number 22, which are named after important dates to the designer. So their heritage is kind of all around this formidable woman who started Chanel. And lots of people have different opinions on Chanel, and there are lots of bits of information around about her as an individual. But I want to focus mainly on the fragrance today. So Gabrielle is kind of inspired by the rebellious spirit of Chanel, the designer. It's a floral fragrance. It's created by Olivier Poge, who is the in-house perfumer at Chanel. And it uses notes like orange blossom, ylang ylang, tuberose to create a really radiant floral. Okay, so it's time. We've waited long enough. We've waited 15 years. It's time to put Gabrielle to the test. Let's sniff. Okay, that's quite enough spritzing. Time for the sniffing. So when I smell Gabrielle, I think it's instantly very Chanel in its style. And when I think of Chanel, especially in the top notes of their fragrances, I think of sparkle. They all have this sort of nice shimmering, glistening quality, classically that came from the aldehydes, which gave kind of a steamy, bubbly effect, but has more and more been about citrus. If we look at their launch from last year, which was Number 5 Bleu, which was a much lighter version of Number 5 for the modern era, the aldehydes were replaced with citrus. And that's very much what's happened with Gabrielle. You get a big whack of citrus that feels really radiant, quite sweet and dewy fresh, not sickly at all, which is very crisp. I feel like it's kind of quite abstract, as many Chanel things are, so you don't get a lot of colour. It feels kind of like the colour's washed out, so you're just getting an impression of citrus, but you're not able to really sit here and say, well, that's lemon, or that's mandarin, or that's blackcurrant. You just get citrus. And that kind of abstraction really follows through in Gabrielle's development. So the heart is a floral accord, that's based around Orange Blossom and Tuberose and Ylang Ylang. But once again, none of those flowers really stick out above any of the others. And they've created, again, an abstract flower, which I'm assuming is Gabrielle's flower. And it smells quite clean. You get a bit of like the green sweetness of Tuberose, a little bit of the freshness of jasmine, but you don't really get anything particularly distinct. And I think that's where Gabrielle falls down a little bit. And really, as it goes into the base, it kind of loses power. So the musks that they've used here, which again were used in number 5 Low, if I'm using that as a comparison, which were used in Low quite successfully to create almost like a warm shawl, like a cashmere accord. In here, they kind of peter out into nothing. And that's where I feel that Gabrielle kind of ends, which is in this situation where you're waiting for something to happen, or you're waiting for her character to come through, and it never really does. So I think there is a bit of discord here in terms of the rebellious single-mindedness of Gabrielle Chanel the person, and then Gabrielle the fragrance. Don't get me wrong, I think it smells lovely. I think it's probably going to do really, really well because it's quite inoffensive. But if I was being truthfully honest, I think it would be fair to say that this is one of Chanel's blander fragrances. They're always very, very commercial. They're always very well composed. And this is definitely commercial and well composed. But I feel like it doesn't have that little extra something that would make you want to go out and wear it. So with Coco Mademoiselle, that's equally as commercial. But there is an area of discord in there and a little bit of, I don't know, strangeness. Just that mere hint in the way that patchouli against the sticky fruit kind of gives this kind of element of jarring, two elements rubbing up against each other. You don't get that in Gabrielle. It's very, very clean. It's very, very bright. It's very, very radiant, but it doesn't say much. So that leaves the verdict then, which I've probably already given more than a few heavy spoilers on. I think Gabrielle is nicely composed. I think it's very pretty. I think it's very clear and transparent and has a radiance to it that is very modern, that I think people will really resonate with. Where Gabrielle kind of lets itself down is that it's not distinct enough. And I think in a blind sniff test, if I was presented this and told to pick out the Chanel, I might not pick this one out, which I think is a real shame. I think it will be really commercial. I think people are going to really like it. I just don't think I'm going to be one of the people that wears it. But that's fine. There's plenty more Chanel for me to keep to myself. So there you have it. That's my review of Gabrielle by Chanel. It took them 15 years to release it, and I feel like it took me about 15 years to do another YouTube video. I am trying to do them weekly, but that's not really sort of feasible for me. So I'm kind of committing to doing them when something interesting or important comes up. So I did a 6 cents for summer, but I would like to do one of those for autumn as well. Someone requested one of those, so I will definitely do that. And also just share big launches with you, I think, and anything that is interesting that comes my way, because I won't be able to do one per week, not with the blog and with the podcast and with working full time. So I will try my best. These will be sporadic, but bear with me. You can subscribe using the buttons on screen, and also there may be links to other videos as well, which you can follow. Tweet me, at me, leave some comments. I'm happy to discuss. I'd love to know what you think of Gabrielle if you've tried it, and I will see you very soon. No, wait, that's not how I sign off. Smell you later.